Returning from the depths of the Amazon basin was meant to be my reset button, an escape from the crushing grind of being a junior partner at Lexington and Moore, one of the fastest-growing firms in Chicago. The trip had been wild, humid, and unforgettable. For the first time in years, I had let go of calendars and contracts and lived like a person again. But now that I'm back, something is terribly wrong. Started subtly, a mild itch on my forearm just below the elbow. I figured it was a bug bite. After all, I had practically bathed in DEET the whole trip, but even that couldn't fend off every mosquito in the jungle. I applied some cream, popped a Benadryl, and went about my day. But the itch didn't go away. By the second night, it was a fiery pulse beneath the skin. The once harmless dot had grown, swollen, angry, and hot to the touch. The pain throbbed like something alive was beneath the surface. At work, it became unbearable. I couldn't sit still, couldn't focus. I scratched until my arm was red and raw, trying to do it subtly beneath my desk. "Celine, are you all right?" Marcus, my office neighbor, asked one afternoon. "Just allergies," I muttered, trying to smile. He didn't buy it, but thankfully he didn't push. I couldn't afford rumors getting to my supervisor. Not with the senior associate position dangling just within reach. That evening, I stumbled into my apartment and beelined for the bathroom mirror. What I saw made my blood run cold. Where there was once a minor irritation, there was now a large blackened lump. The center hardened and cracked like burnt tree bark. A foul-smelling yellow fluid leaked from splits in the skin. It looked necrotic. I grabbed the strongest antiseptic I owned. The moment the liquid touched my arm, pain exploded. I screamed, clutching the counter to keep from collapsing. The next morning, I was in the ER by 7 a.m. The nurse recoiled when she saw my arm. A doctor came in, then another, then two more. They stared in silence before one finally said, "Looks like something tropical. We'll need tests. A lot of them." They sent me home with antibiotics and some painkillers. But I knew, deep in my gut, this wasn't just some infection. That night, I was awakened by a pain so intense I thought my arm had split open. I ran to the mirror, peeled away the bandages, and screamed. My flesh had opened into a deep, pus-filled cavity. In the center, something moved. My hands shook as I reached for the tweezers. I pulled. A small, squirming worm emerged, pale, writhing, alive. I dropped it into the sink and gagged, tears streaming down my face. But when I looked back, there were more, so many more. The following days spiraled into a waking nightmare. My entire body burned with fever. The wound widened, skin flaking off like paper in water. My shirts clung to my arm from the endless seeping. The smell, like spoiled meat and chemicals, hung in the air, unshakable. Every night, I sat on the bathroom floor under flickering lights, dragging larvae from the open wound. My body screamed for rest, but my mind was haunted by the sensation of movement under my skin. I stopped answering calls. I stopped going to work. By the 5th day, I couldn't move my left hand. The infection had spread, turning my skin nearly translucent. I saw them, dozens of squirming white shapes dancing just beneath the surface. I threw up right there on the tile. The sour smell of bile joined the festering scent of my arm. I screamed at them, "Get out of me! Get out!" But they didn't listen. They kept digging, chewing, multiplying. The sound of them burrowing into my flesh was no longer a hallucination. It was real, a wet, grotesque rustling I couldn't unhear. I was being hollowed out, and I was running out of time. By the 5th day, whatever was inside me had taken full control. It started with a subtle prickling in my fingertips, like pins tapping from the inside. Then came the numbness. I watched in paralyzed horror as my left hand stiffened, then drooped, lifeless. The skin had changed again. It no longer looked like skin. It shimmered with an unnatural green tint, slick and wet, almost amphibian in texture. My breath came in short gasps as I wrapped it hastily with a towel, which immediately darkened with the foul, oozing fluid. I called a ride to the hospital. My fingers barely worked the screen. When the car pulled up, I hesitated before getting in. adjusting the towel to hide what I could. But the putrid liquid seeped through before I even shut the door. "Morning," I croaked, my voice thin and broken. The driver, a warm-faced man in his 50s, gave me a polite smile through the rear view until the stench hit him. He flinched. Are you all right?" "Just an infection. Need a doctor," I murmured. He nodded, rolled all 4 windows down, and drove in silence. Every few seconds, he glanced at me through the mirror, one hand occasionally covering his nose. His unease was contagious. By the time we reached the hospital, I could feel the air thick with rot. Not just from my arm anymore, it was deeper, coming from inside me. I stumbled through the entrance, one hand clutching the towel, the other trembling uncontrollably. The waiting room split apart like I carried a bomb. People recoiled. One woman covered her child's eyes, another gagged. The triage nurse didn't even ask questions. She pressed a button, called security, and rushed me into the emergency ward. It was the same doctor from before, Dr. Halvorsen. He didn't hide the shock on his face when he saw me again. "Celine, what happened to you?" he asked, pulling on gloves and a mask in one fluid motion. "It's spreading. I can't stop it," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I think it's alive." He peeled back the soaked towel. His eyes widened. My entire forearm had turned into something unholy, a gaping wound of blackened flesh and twitching filth. The center pulsed faintly, as if something was breathing inside. Tiny white larvae writhed around the edges, burrowing in and out like miners in diseased earth. Dr. Halvorsen took a sharp breath and turned to the nurse. "We need surgical prep. Now, this is far beyond localized infection." I was wheeled into a cold operating theater, lights burning down on me like judgmental eyes. The nurses were professionals, but I could see the fear under their calm. The doctor took my good hand gently. "Celine, we have to remove the arm. It's the only way to stop it." I nodded, not out of bravery, but exhaustion. I had nothing left to fight with. The sedation hit, but they kept me conscious enough for awareness, just below pain. Then came the scalpel. The moment it touched my skin, everything changed. A sound burst from the wound, a wet pop, followed by a rising hiss. Then, chaos. From the incision, a flood erupted. Not blood, worms. Thick, white, wriggling creatures surged outward like a geyser under pressure. Some were longer than my fingers, their translucent bodies squirming violently in the light. They slithered down my arm, off the table onto the sterile floor. The nurses screamed. Metal trays clattered as people backed away in terror. One of them slipped and fell, crushing a few of the larvae with a sickening crunch. Others scattered toward the walls, trying to escape the tide. Dr. Halvorsen stared at the gushing mess in disbelief, then shouted, "Shut it down! Call containment! Now!" But I wasn't listening. All I could do was watch, tears streaking my cheeks, as a part of me spilled out onto the floor, something far beyond human biology. They had tried to cut it out, but it was too late. "My God!" Dr. Halvorsen whispered, barely masking the panic in his voice. The surgical lights above buzzed faintly as the nightmare unfolded beneath them. The worms, dozens, maybe hundreds, spilled from my arm like water from a shattered pipe. They dropped to the floor, squirming in every direction, glistening in the cold fluorescence. The smell was worse than death. Wet rot and bile, thick enough to taste, clung to every breath. The doctor pressed forward, hands shaking as he carved through the dying flesh, trying to amputate before the infestation could spread further. But the worms weren't done. They came from inside me. From deep within muscles, ligaments, veins, they burst out, tunneling through tissue as if they were following trails carved long ago. They latched onto my nerves, slithered down bones, gnawed through everything. The sedatives dulled the sharpest edge of pain, but not the sensation. I felt them move, each bite, each squirming inch like hot wires pulling me apart from the inside. "We have to finish this now," the doctor shouted, grabbing the surgical saw with trembling fingers. As the blade touched bone, the creatures reacted. They surged, faster, thicker, furious. From the exposed wound, they exploded out, spraying pus and larvae across the doctor's mask and visor. One long worm slipped into the cuff of his glove, and within seconds, it was wriggling up his wrist. "Get it OFF me!" he screamed, stumbling backward. A nurse rushed to help him, but slipped on the gore-soaked floor, crashing into a tray of instruments. The entire operating room had dissolved into chaos. Blood, mucus, and parasites covered the tiles like a plague. Stainless steel tools clanged against walls as the nurses backed away in horror, unsure of what to touch or what not to. And I could feel them moving deeper, crawling past the shoulder, down the spine, into my gut. They were everywhere now. I blinked back tears, turned my head weakly toward the doctor. "It's too late," I whispered. "They're inside me, all of me." He stared at me, not with sympathy but with fear. His hands were streaked with my blood. His mask hung loose. He was pale, shaking, retreating. "Celine, I don't know what this is. I'm sorry." And then the lights above me pulsed, dimmed. My world tilted and faded. When I looked down at my body, my hands, they weren't mine anymore. The skin was riddled with holes, small, twitching tunnels. And from each of them the creatures emerged, one by one, in and out, as if I were no longer a person. I was a hive, a living nest, a vessel.